All right. Good evening. Good evening. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us at our joint public hearing for June. And we are going to start with the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda, questions, comments, or motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves. Motion carries. We will start with our first one, which is ZTA-3-26 flood damage prevention updates. Mr. Brown.
Good evening, Mayor, council members of the Land Use Review Board. I have before you tonight ZTA 326, which is an update to our flood damage prevention ordinance. The reason we're doing this is there was a recent update from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety and FEMA regarding kind of the model ordinance language for floodplains, and it impacts 3 chapters of our UDO. Chapter 9, which is our environmental protection standards, that's where our floodplain damage prevention ordinance is housed. It also affects Chapter 12, our administrative standards. They've standardized some forms that FEMA has for elevation certificates and flood proofing, and then Chapter 15, there's a lot of updates to different definitions of the flood hazard areas. And so tonight is the joint public hearing. This is scheduled to go to the Land Use Review Board in July and back to the Town Council in August for a final decision. Really, there's 4 buckets of changes, if you will. The first is a new floodplain that's called a community flood hazard area. This is an area that if it's not on a FEMA designated flood map, but the community knows there are flooding issues such as eyewitness observations, high water marks, things of that nature, where flooding is a persistent problem, the local floodplain administrator can ask for this to be designated as a floodplain. And so it's different than the flood insurance rate maps. It's just a locally designated area. There are different flood hazard reduction ordinances, some further limitations on what can be done in a floodplain with accessory buildings, recreational vehicles, and fill dirt. Again, various new or modified definitions, including that new community flood hazard area, and then more well-defined procedures to stop or correct violations within flood area zones. Looking at the strategic plan and comprehensive plan for this, obviously we try to bolster a safe community, and flood hazard reduction is certainly part of that. And then being sustainable and trying to preserve and protect our natural and environmental features, and making sure our regulations adapt to environmental change. Looking at the comprehensive plan and our preserved open space, we do a really good job in our UDO now. We don't allow for flood hazard areas to be mapped onto individual lots, so there's not a whole lot of folks in Knightdale who need to carry flood insurance. We try to protect those areas and put them in either homeowners association or local control as much as possible, and we don't allow much development or growth in areas beyond that, even our new riparian buffers. And so this being a public hearing tonight, our process is I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me from both the council and the Land Use Review Board. We'll hear any public comment tonight, and then our staff recommendation is after that is to close the public hearing and refer ZTA 326 to the July 13th Land Use Review Board meeting for recommendation and advisory statement. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions or comments from council?
So would these be, do you anticipate these eventually getting mapped and we sort of creating some GIS layers or something? In other words, ahead of development, or just, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but, there can be certainly, if there's legislation that allows the floodplain administrator to designate those areas, there could be a point of contention with somebody saying, no, there's no reason why I can't develop there. But if we had something designated ahead of time, I could see that sort of helping us a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any areas where we would necessarily utilize that section as it stands right now. Of course, with changes in the environment and things of that nature, I don't know what the future might hold, but I wouldn't anticipate there's any that we have identified or would identify now that wouldn't be part of the already adopted flood insurance rate maps. So I don't think that there would be any, but I'm not, 100% positive. But if there are, there's a procedure to go through to designate those areas, and it includes public hearings and things like that. And then once you do that, we certainly would have to keep it on a GIS layer or map somewhere.
Any others from our alert members? All right, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing. At this time, I will open the floor for public comment. If there's anyone here tonight who wishes to speak on this item, you may come forward at this time. All right, if not, then I will bring it back to council for any last questions or comments. Or motion.
I'll make a motion to refer ZTA 326 to the July 13th, 2026 Land Use Review Board meeting for recommendation and advisory statement.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves. Motion carries. We will move to our second, which is ZMA-2-26 Farmwell Road office conversion.
Thank you, Mayor Day. Good evening, council. Good evening, alert members. Thank you for joining us. This is the last public hearing for tonight, which is ZMA 2-26. It's a conditional district rezone for a property located at 5845 Farmwell Road. Looking at the vicinity, the subject property is located on Farmwell Road. It's about midway between Old Mill Burney Road and Hodge Road. Knightdale Gateway is immediately adjacent to the north. Currently, the zoning of the area, or the zoning of the subject property is GR3, so it's a residential zoning district. There are other low-density residential uses, as well as some commercial and industrial in the vicinity. So looking at the project profile, the site's about 0.6 acres, and it's currently cited as a 1,600 square foot home. What's being proposed is that this existing home is converted to a professional office. The applicant is here tonight, and they can provide more details on the actual operation of what they foresee this office being. But moving forward, here's a quick look at the master plan. Looking at it, you got Farmwell Road on the right, and they're proposing to build or construct 4 parking spaces to the rear of the existing structure. No other real site improvements are necessary here or really proposed. Here are some renderings of the existing home, and if you were to go out there today, this is generally what you would see. So with looking at the project timeline, we're here for the joint public hearing. We met all notification requirements to hold this hearing. So looking at the timeline, it's been about a year that we've been working with the applicant here. We met with them back in June of 2025 to talk about what this process looks like. Talked about the UDO comprehensive plan, all of our adopted plans. At that time, they went ahead and submitted a sketch plan in December. So that's largely the same as what you see today. During that review, it was identified that several variances would likely be required in order to allow for this adaptive reuse of the existing property. So the applicant submitted a variance petition, and the Board of Adjustment granted that variance on March 24th, 2026, and it removed the requirement to install vegetative buffers along the 2 common property lines that are adjacent to residential uses. Also removed a requirement to install roadway and pedestrian improvements along both Farmwell Road and Coffee Street to the rear. And then also part of that, they got relief from the requirement to route utilities underground as part of construction. So all that to say, there have been several variances granted for this that remove your typical requirements for commercial developments to allow for this adaptive reuse project. In April, neighborhood meeting was held. 2 nearby neighbors attended that in-person meeting. They had general questions about the rezoning request itself, and the process. Also had questions about the parking, where it'd be located, the total number. Also talked about landscape buffers and fencing that will be put in place, and then whether or not, how the neighbors felt about the need for roadway improvements. After that, in May, we took this to Development Review Committee. No action was taken by that committee because the town council was the decision maker for this rezoning. It was a fairly straightforward meeting. We talked about public gathering areas and whether or not that could be incorporated into the site, fire department access, trash screening of those receptacles, the different requirements for private water and sewer, and then just some general minor cleanup items. And then here's another quick look at the master plan that was submitted after that DRC meeting. Again, it's a redevelopment project looking to utilize the existing 1,600 square foot home, convert it to an office space for professional services. And I didn't mention earlier with the variance, there were several conditions added to that. They're largely about the fence, installing a fence with some shrubs to the rear to lessen the impact of that small parking lot. I think I have a slide about it, so I'm getting ahead of myself. But in general, the request is to convert this home to an office. The NMX, neighborhood mixed use, is the base zoning district. All the standards must be met unless the conditions are proposed or approved by council. And this master plan and the specific uses will become conditions. So if another tenant or another business owner came in that didn't fit into the professional service use category or what's contained within this application, they'd be required to come back before council and go through a rezoning process. Moving on to comprehensive plan consistency. Consistency statements are important, and explaining why the council's action is reasonable in public interest. Looking at the intentional growth areas map, this gives the decision makers an idea of areas that are ripe for development, access to available infrastructure, and these areas have been identified to help accommodate growth and provide services, continue providing services to our citizens and future citizens. And then also these areas just give an opportunity for business owners to reimagine Knightdale's future and be part of Knightdale here. Looking at the urban small town framework map, it's classified in multiple categories. They're all related to transit-oriented development, and being that it's along a bus rapid transit corridor. Some additional information, I know we're fairly familiar with BRT and making sure that there's places for stops along our Knightdale Boulevard. And then, with the future of BRT, we want to ensure that remains a viable option in the future down the boulevard. So, with this, there's an existing bus stop on Farmwell Road. In the future with Knightdale Gateway, there will be the stop will be slightly relocated so then it's accessible on Knightdale Boulevard, and a shelter will be constructed. Then future place type map, last stop here. It's located subject property is located within the Innovation Center. These are meant to be alternatives to your conventional or typical industrial park. The comprehensive plan talks about including a mixture of non-residential uses, and those being the primary makeup over residential. The key to this is that any non-residential use should be compatible with the area and complement the existing development in the vicinity, while providing support to nearby retail, distribution and those employees in the vicinity. Also talks about parking to the rear and then providing natural areas and public spaces. And then the comprehensive plan also details different design characteristics that should be implemented through this development. Then looking at the place type transect, the Innovation Center is the most intense classification on this. Have a little typo there, but this graphic, as you're familiar, shows how different uses can blend together and coexist. We're all familiar with the 8 guiding principles. Looking at this proposal, we identified that it lends itself to 3 of those guiding principles. The first being the planned and orderly growth, second being inclusive livable town, and then the third being economic vitality. And here's just all 8 of them as a reminder. The roadway network plan, side path and greenway plan, with the variances, the Board of Adjustment found that they met the required findings to not install required roadway improvements, pedestrian improvements, so therefore, in face value, this project is generally consistent with those 2 plans there. Looking at the comprehensive parks and rec map, the subject property is located within the 2.5-mile service area of Knightdale Community Pool. As part of the application, the applicant did offer several conditions. Most of them were already captured in the variance, the conditions for the variance approval, so I didn't find that it was necessary to attach them to this zoning case. The variance approval runs with the land in perpetuity, so any development would be bound by those conditions, which I will get to. But they're proposing that the hours of operation will just be Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 p.m., and all services appointment will be by appointment only. But again, looking at the conditions for the variance, it talks about requiring a 6-foot-tall fence and some shrubs around the parking area to the rear to lessen the impacts. Talks about limiting the exterior lighting to be only lights on the building to again limit its impact to the neighbors, and then just through the process they're going to dedicate the additional right-of-way along Farmwell and Coffee Street, so then whenever a project does come forward, we have the right-of-way available to make the necessary roadway improvements. And then just some other conditions about making sure that they don't place things in the areas where future improvements would be made. But with that concludes my presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Following that, the applicant and their engineer are here to answer any questions and provide a little bit more detail. Following that, we'll have the general public comments. I don't know if anyone's here, but we'll have that option. But after that, staff's recommendation is to close the public hearing and refer ZMA 2-26 to the Land Use Review Board for review and recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I have one question. So, we've gotten accustomed to looking at much larger scale developments, and so kind of zoomed in here. When we've got a smaller proposal like this, the new plantings that are occurring, are they required to be in line with our UDO with like the native plantings and that type of thing?
Yeah, this project would still be subject to Chapter 7 with
Okay.
the landscaping requirements.
I know previously when we saw a project like this with the Edward Jones building downtown, they offered a condition that they would remove any invasive or noxious plants, especially when we've got older houses like this. Over the years, there's can tend to be a buildup of plants that we wouldn't find acceptable anymore, like a Bradford pear or something like that. So I'd love to see a condition to remove any invasive or noxious plants that are on the property.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think from my comment, sort of the code that we already have, I think takes care of a lot of things. A lot of times I've seen these houses get sort of adaptively reused and parking in the front, a lot of asphalt in the front. So I'm looking at it as basically there's a driveway, you wouldn't necessarily know any difference. So from that standpoint, I like where it's gotten to, especially the variances given, so that it doesn't, it could almost feel like it stands out. If it, a lot of too much screening, I think screening to the rear is appropriate. All of that that's included, I think, is getting us to a really good place. So I'm glad that it's been able to be worked through to the point that it is.
Thank you.
So I echo Councilman Morgan's statement. I'm a big fan of adaptive reuse. And the variance is to not put too much of the onus in terms of some of the heavier infrastructure such as sidewalk and improvements of that sort on these small businesses. But and I think I did hear you reference this. So unless something falls into the category of acceptable uses in current, right? Like if it changed ownership, it would have to come back before this council, or if there was any more extensive construction-related activities, it would come back to this council for review in terms of any of those types of variances that we may be affording now that we could still attach to a project, correct?
Yeah, if the use change. So
Okay.
if, say, a new owner comes in and is doing the same exact thing, they likely would fall under this zoning, with looking at it from a use. So, that would necessitate. So say someone wanted to come in and open a barber shop. That would be a completely different use category, and we would be here at some point. Hopefully we don't have to at this property. Hopefully we have success if this is approved, but yeah, council would have another go around.
And this follows our sign ordinance in terms of any placards or any type of identifiable business signage from the yardage and things of
Yeah.
that nature, right?
There we go.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and the only other comment I would make, it sounds odd, but I think when we think about professional usage, this is certainly a, low usage category. You're talking about appointment only and all. I would also think about, if the property were sold or whatever, that if there's other uses that sort of fit in that same definition, it probably would behoove us not to exclude, ones, have it too narrow. Definitely want it to be narrow, but not maybe too narrow, so that, probably not a barber shop or something of that nature, perhaps. But, there's some other things that are on the professional type office setting that I think would be fine that could be handled administratively. Is sort of where I'm leaning on that.
Yeah, and within the professional services definition, it talks about, various, office-related uses. If Edward Jones wanted to move over here, that's some sort of office use that would, fall under this. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, the psychological services. There are other UDO definitions within professional services that we could look through and, if staff's comfortable, move forward through a zoning compliance permit or the appropriate process.
Any questions from our LURB members? All right. If not, thank you so much. And now I believe we have the applicant here. I will give some space for the applicant to speak.
Good evening, council members. My name is Amber Margaretin. I'm the owner of Worry Free Psychology. I also live right here in Knightdale, so it's really important for me to open up a business in my community. Just a little bit about what we do. Our meat and potatoes, if you will, is psychological testing. And when most people hear about psychological services, they immediately think therapy. While we do offer therapy, all of our therapy is actually virtual. So our psychological testing services is what we do in person. And the way that differs from therapy is that psychological testing takes hours. So one client could take 4 hours, right? And so then we're seeing 2 a day, right, just for one staff. So in this house, for example, that we're looking to rezone has a maximum of 3 offices. So if we had 3 people working, you're looking at a maximum of 6 people a day. And that's really like worst case scenario, right? It might even be less than that. So just to give you an example of how low use it will be. There's not going to be a lot of cars going in and out. We are only open Monday through Friday, very reasonable hours, typical working 8 to 5, no holidays, no weekends. In terms of why I picked this location, we've outgrown our current space. We're in the current building right in between the Burger King and the KFC, and there's just no more room. So in the process of looking for office space, I was just running into roadblock after roadblock, and this ended up being the cheapest option, as well as an option that is right on a bus stop. We do take insurance, which is what is really unique in our field, and we're a really accessible practice. We're in network with every single North Carolina Medicaid plan, most major insurances, and so we do have a lot of clients who will be utilizing the public bus system, which is great. So that was one of the main reasons why I also picked this location. I've done my best to meet the neighbors and get their input. One of my neighbors is really excited for his property value to go up if this gets rezoned, and he's even been asking me what he needs to do to get his rezoned to sell it as commercial too. But don't worry, I discouraged him from that. But I'm trying to think of what else may be helpful for y'all to know. I don't know. Any questions? Anything that's you need to know that's helpful for you to help make your decision?
Any questions for the applicant?
Just to put into perspective how necessary our services are, we have over 400 people on our wait list, and so we're looking at like 6 to 8 month wait list. And ideally, if we can move into a bigger space, I can hire more staff and we can get that down. While we are serving Knightdale, we have people driving from Boone, Greenville, you name it, to receive our services. So just trying to provide necessary services to our members.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Once again, this is a public hearing item. If there is anyone here tonight who wishes to speak on this item, you may come forward at this time. If not, then at this time, I will turn it over to our town clerk to share written comments.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the Land Use Review Board. We did receive 9 written comments for tonight's case. The following individuals all shared remarks in favor of ZMA 2-26. Ryan Weehan, 409 Liberty Express Place. Ashley Kaplan, 630 Sunland Drive. Mira Waters, 502 Sunland Drive. Caroline Wayman, 409 Liberty Express Place. Lindsay Hale, 4821 Stony Oak Lane, Raleigh. Cammie Roth, 1205 Jameson Pond Drive. Tracy Conti, 611 Heartland Flyer Drive. Laura Gallinger, 249 Douglas Falls Drive in Wendell. And Amber Margaretin, 614 Sunland Drive. Since you've received all these comments in their entirety, I just want to briefly share some common themes that were provided throughout these comments. Just the need for more affordable office space in Knightdale, the property location already being in a commercial area, the high demand and need for the services that are proposed at this site, and the limited impact to traffic that the proposal would bring. So the full comments will be included in the official record of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. All right. Now we'll bring it back to council. And if there are no more comments or questions, closing the public hearing and a motion.
I make a motion to refer ZMA-2-26 to the Land Use Review Board for review and recommendation. Oh. And I make a recommendation to close the joint public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves. Motion carries. That is our last item on the agenda for this evening. So at this point, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves. Motion carries.